Born in Paris on the 27th of September 1887 into a family of tanners based in Picardy, Jean-Alexandre Patou, renamed Jean Patou, first joined the army before turning his eye to fashion. His father was a tanner of chamois, the very finest leathers for bookbinding, and his mother a housewife. He trained in creating fur fashions before starting out in a few failed ventures as a tailor. Patou succeeded in opening a dress shop in Paris, Maison Paris, in 1912, at the age of 23, then created his own brand in Paris in 1914. 2 years later, he was starting to gain some popularity, thanks to a generous American department store buyer known as the Elder Liechtenstein, who purchased his entire collection. World War I halted the fashion industry in Paris. During the war, he had served as a captain in the French Zouavi regiment in Thessaloniki, Greece. It was there Patou would encounter much of the folk embroidery, beading and vibrant colour palettes of the traditional Greek dress that would go on to inspire his later work. Upon his return to Paris, he reopened his couture workshop and discovered the beauty of the East and the Balkans. His venture was a family business, alongside his parents, his sister Madeleine, and her husband. Patou became a leading international couturier. He commissioned his fellow officer Bernard Boteau de Monville, who was working for several fashion magazines, to illustrate many of his advertisements. Patou's salon was decorated by the leading Art Deco designers Louis Sue and André Maire, who painted the interior and upholstered the furniture in a colour described as ash beige, and installed huge mirrors to accentuate the building's 18th century proportions. A dandy of the roaring 20s and an enlightened ascete with impeccable taste, he travelled all over Europe and the United States, always with a cigarette positioned elegantly between his fingertips. The American press describes him as the most elegant man in Europe. A socialite, he liked to party and dine at Maxim's. He himself organized evening fashion shows that sometimes continued until the early morning. Infatuated with high speed and thrills, Jean Patou drove racing cars, gambled at casinos, and sailed speedboats on the open sea. A man in motion, Patou was always moving forward.
Spring has a day with a saying, someone has won with Charmaine.
He lost no time catching up on lost time. Patou presented his first collection under his own name in 1919. It was an immediate success, and he very quickly had enough private clients to put him in the same league as Chanel and Molyneux, who were joint leaders in the popularity stakes at that time. But American buyers were tempered in their enthusiasm. They recognized that Patou's clothes were speaking a new, modern language, but they looked so French. How would they be understood by American women? His closest family members were his sister, Madeleine Patou, who was his first muse, and his brother-in-law, Raymond Barbar, who was an important business partner throughout Patou's career. His collections of 1920 and 1921 represented his worldly influences from his time in the war. He drew from Russian influences and his use of scarves as girdles, which was published in Vogue on October 15, 1921, as one of his signature designs. Also signature to Patou was his sportswear for women, which was similar to Chanel, though he would never have admitted it. He used jersey, which was originally used for menswear, in special shades of beige, green and blue, even before Chanel famously employed them in her collections. He designed clothes that were easier to move for the more modern and active woman that emerged in the 20s. On meeting the androgynous, elegant tennis star Suzanne Lenglen, Patou recognized instantly that she personified the fashionable new woman. He set a scandalous trend: calf-length skirts and a sleeveless cardigan. The new design created a lot of press for Patou, including a spread in Vogue featuring Lenglen. The new trend was called the garçon, which was the boyish, slender look of the times. He continued to gain success after opening his Coin de Sport shop, where he sold these shorter skirts as well as accessories for a wide range of women's sports, including swimwear, riding, hunting and fishing.
I saw the true light. You are mine, I know. Your lips told me so. Dreams I might have known, love and all have flown. Empty arms tell my story. You and I, who were light-hearted, parted one blue night.
Patou did not regard himself as a skilled draftsman. He claimed that not only could he not draw, but also that a pair of scissors was a dangerous weapon in his hands. Each season he provided the designers in his laboratory with various antique textiles, fragments of embroidery, and documents annotated with special instructions for the styles and colours he wanted to develop. His staff would then develop these ideas and present him with toiles, sample garments made using inexpensive fabric to check cut and fit, which Patou modified until he was satisfied. It was during this period that the designer totally overhauled the trend for boxy, flapper-esque designs by lengthening skirts to emphasize stature and raising waistlines so that they sat at the slimmest part of a woman's torso. Famously, Patou can be credited for his groundbreaking adoption of sportswear as daywear, producing clothes that were equally comfortable and desirable for his discerning clientele, including pleated knee-length tennis dresses, knitted bathing suits, and cardigans emblazoned with JP. In 1924, Patou opened additional branches of his fashion house at the fashionable French seaside resorts of Deauville and Biarritz to sell his ready-made sportswear and accessories, with a room devoted to clothing for each sport and a selection of coordinating accessories. The same year, Jean Patou would launch its first perfume line in collaboration with Henry Almaraz. This would become the house's saving grace during the Great Depression of the 1930s, when the couture market nearly collapsed, with Patou's signature fragrance, Joy, bolstering company revenue. With the scent containing over 10,000 jasmine flowers per ounce, it was dubbed the most expensive fragrance in the world, one that still rivals the popularity of Chanel No. 5 to this day.
After we are married, whenever you're blue, I'll sing a little theme song to you, telling you I love you.
Patou understood what women wanted in fashion before Chanel or any other couturier in Paris, and he had a moment of inspiration that was to make him famous and exceedingly rich. Moreover, it changed the face, shape and tone of international fashion. Patou decided that to conquer the loyalty of American women, he needed to show his clothes on women with whom they could identify. The traditional catwalk models in Paris had an old-fashioned and certainly pre-war homeliness, which most fashionable clothes at that time emphasized by highlighting their bosoms and hips. American models were taller and skinnier. Some appeared to have no hips at all. Others, with their cropped hair, looked like young boys. But the most glaring difference to Patou was their slim ankles and athletic legs. They even walked differently to European models. With a great deal of publicity, Patou set off on the cruise liner Normandy to find his models at source in New York. His progress watched cautiously by other couturiers, especially Chanel. Patou knew that for him to make real money, he needed two types of sale. One was the traditional individual sale to private customers who were mainly, but not all, European and, of those, predominantly French. But he needed the American market to show interest too, and with it the American magazines like Vogue and Harper's Bazaar, because he knew the publicity they brought was a designer's lifeblood. With the help of Vogue's editor-in-chief, Edna Woolman Chase, he advertised for a casting in New York. The advert stated, "Must be smart, slender, with well-shaped feet and ankles, and a refined manner." Over 500 hopefuls arrived at the Ritz Ballroom for the audition. The jury was actress and decorator Elsie de Wolfe, who was the author of the 1913 book The House in Good Taste, the photographer Edward Stryken, Woolman Chase, her proprietor Condé Nast, and Patou. Patou had come to America thinking he required only 3 models, but he decided to double the number, and it was 6 models photographed on the decks of the cruise liner before it set off to bring them to Paris. The French capital was intrigued by this development, but not convinced of its worth, all apart from Chanel, that is. She was furious, not only because Patou had upstaged her in the vital US market, but mainly because she had to admit, at least to herself, that he had judged the modern mood of fashion perfectly. The French press accused him of disloyalty to his country for using American models, and, to disarm their criticism, he came up with a slogan: "The French woman is Venus, the American Diana." It cut little ice, but in truth, Patou had become too powerful to be wounded by the press.
Don't say goodbye, somehow it's wrong. Clouds in the sky.
When every other couturier was still designing short skirts, he sent out a collection with longer skirts. It had an impact akin to that of Dior's new look over 20 years later. For a second time, even Chanel had to follow. Her partisan supporters have since said that she dropped the hem first, but Woolman Chase maintained that although Chanel's reaction was quick, she hit the deck seconds behind the great innovator. Patou and Chanel spent the rest of their life, before Patou's early death, being very publicly, furiously jealous of each other. They compared the space given to their clothes in Vogue. Woolman Chase was accused of favoritism. Threats of a boycott of her magazine was hinted at, and, as it turned out, the more aggressive party was Patou.
For long, a blackbird can sing of good days in store, when spring will bring the flowers once more. Don't look so sad, just think of when good days.
Chanel and Patou were famed for the animosity they felt for each other. They were deep rivals for the patronage of the new post-World War I customer, an individual with buying power, who had barely existed in the early years of pre-war Paris. Their jealousy was an obsession and a cause for endless gossip in gatherings where the likes of Cecil Beaton disported themselves. "Tearing reputations to shreds over a cocktail," as Cole Porter once put it. Into this world, Patou and Chanel fitted perfectly. They realized that clothes had to be modernized and simplified. Both were shrewd enough to know that they had to annex this new market without losing old customers, and they both wanted to be the first to do so.
At the dawn of the 1920s, America was clearly entering a new era, an era defined by a vast and complicated urban culture that would dominate the rest of the 20th century. After World War I, there was an eagerness to embrace the new, and it was in America's cities, most dramatically in its biggest, New York, where the modern age was born. The very architecture of the city spoke of America's new ascendancy and her aspirations.
He dressed the actresses Constance Bennett and Louise Brooks, Josephine Baker and the Dolly Sisters, and aristocrats from all over Europe, including the Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna. Early on, he understood the nature of commercializing his new designs, and opened stores in Monte Carlo, Biarritz, Deauville and Venice. These chic watering holes provided him with sales points from which to dress the most watched women of the period. His early bathing costumes and his elegant embroidered and beaded princess line evening dresses, often worn with magnificent fur-trimmed capes, all defined luxury in the period. Patou and Chanel were the leading exponents of the garçon look that dominated the fashion of the 1920s. Patou was particularly well known for his geometric designs. Most famous are the sweaters he designed from 1924 with Cubist-style blocks of colour inspired by the paintings of Braque and Picasso. This ultra-modern motif was then applied to matching skirts, bags and bathing costumes. Although Patou was influenced by the fine arts, he was emphatic that he himself was not an artist, and that a successful couturier did not have to be one. What is needed is taste, a sense of harmony, and to avoid eccentricity. His eminently wearable sweaters with horizontal stripes in contrasting colours teamed with box-pleated skirts were regularly featured in Vogue magazine. Jean Patou the man was an archetypal socialite and playboy. He was barely seen in informal dress, except when sailing in Biarritz, and once said in an interview that, to be truly well-groomed, a man should have at least 80 suits. He was a book collector and, in a throwback to his father's roots, had a perfectly leather-bound library. His parties rivaled those of Paul Porot for conspicuous consumption. Janet Flanner, a highly respected American journalist in Paris, who wrote up stories for the New Yorker, described one of Jean Patou's parties in 1930. His garden, which had been roofed over, had every surface covered in silver foil, including the trees. 3 small lion cubs were in attendance for the R factor. Certainly Flanner was more amused than impressed. He loved powerboats, fast cars, and the very top restaurants in New York, Paris, and Biarritz. He also enjoyed displaying the latest beauty or heiress on his arm. He cheekily told an interviewer, with or without his tongue-in-cheek is unknown, "You see, I have a good deal of confidence." Most of his friends were male and some years older, prompting modern commentators to speculate on his true sexuality. But he kept his love life well hidden. Like many other companies, Jean Patou suffered the consequences of the Wall Street crash, but some say his business may have been on the way to recovery at the time of his death in 1936. Patou died suddenly of an embolism on the 8th of March 1936 in his Paris apartment at Champs-Élysées. He was aged just 48. Various reasons were given for his death, including apoplexy, exhaustion from work and frenetic gambling, and the after effects of a car wreck. He is buried in the Cimetière de Passy, Paris. After his death, it was revealed that his firm, once so successful, had been in liquidation since July of the previous year, with a deficit of over 12 million francs. It is most probable that his premature death saved him from a humiliating end like that of Porot, whose last years were spent in abject poverty, alone, forgotten and unsung. It has been suggested that one of the reasons Chanel despised Patou was that, to her, he was a fraud. She was a technician who knew everything about making a garment. He knew nothing about the practicalities, was not hands-on, and directed rather than created garments, which showed in fact he had incredible foresight, as it's the way that many top designers work today. Well, my dears, I hope you enjoyed that presentation. Again, we are still flitting around the 1920s because what a glorious age it was. The footage that you're looking at is Patou's fashion house after his death. It continued for some time and then it was defunct, and I believe in recent years it has opened again. Correct me if I'm wrong. I did read something like that, I believe. So this is obviously 60s footage. Isn't that fabulous? When you look at some of the fashions that Patou's models were wearing, it's really quite modern. You wouldn't be able to tell, particularly in this image, you would not be able to tell that it's not a modern outfit. So it doesn't seem like they can go anywhere with fashion now. And if you look at some of the crazy stuff that the models are parading on the catwalk, sort of bin bags and stuff, and gas masks and all that rubbish. They've lost it. There's nothing left really. Jeans are timeless. You can't beat them. And dungarees. Bring dungarees back. They're comfortable. You don't need a belt. I'm going to get a pair when I'm retired. I do have braces. I think the Americans call them suspenders. They are great. When I'm working, I like to have those on. If I'm doing a lot of physical work, if I'm bending down with a belt, it's a how am I getting to this? Well, I'm getting sidetracked. I'm getting sidetracked again. That's what happens when you get to my advanced age. So Jean Patou and Coco Chanel, enemies till the end. It is a problem, though, when you are both competing in the same area of expertise, and there's obviously going to be a lot of competitive jealousy. I've even seen it on YouTube where there's been a lot of channels who have followed in my footsteps and trailed on my coattails and copied a lot of stuff. They even try to copy my voice or imitate my voice. And now they're getting more views than me. That really adds insult to injury. Some of my viewers on YouTube would say that I'm to blame because I focused on Patreon. And I did. I don't know. There's just something about the people who run YouTube. I just don't like them. I'm not in tune with them. And they deliberately targeted me and made sure that my competitors got more views than me. So that's why I'd had enough of them in the end. But that's how it goes. I try not to be bitter about it. I had my fun. Eventually everything comes to an end. I will go gracefully when my time is up, and I'll know it. I mean, it's up on YouTube. I don't upload there anymore. I'm only here on Patreon, and when it gets to below a certain money level, I'm going to stop, obviously. But it's been fun. I can't regret it. I will never have any regrets because it was a lot of fun. Anyway, let's get back to Jean Patou and not Oddie Beau. Deauville, though. They should have had a Beauville, where all the Oddie friends could stay on a forever resort, trapped in the 1920s. Anyway, enough of my daydreaming. Check this out. I was researching for different images and I found this Jean Patou Cartier. Isn't that wonderful? I'm going to get sidetracked, I know, but I'll quickly just mention that I've been looking at 1920s perfume bottles. Man, they are works of art by themselves. Absolutely gorgeous. I mean, if you put them in a glass cabinet, you'd have a fantastic collection, but they cost a lot of money, really. I mean, Lalique glass, and some of them looked like an Egyptian sarcophagus with it, the casing was like paper mache or leather or something opened up, and then you had the glass mummy inside. Incredible stuff. Go and check it out. So this one is a lipstick, push button lipstick in vermilion and silver, streaked and black lacquered, green jewelry box with gold edging and clasps, titled inside 13 Rue de la Paris in New York, under the base of the lipstick titled Lift Jean Patou Cartier. Isn't that wonderful? But look at the estimated price, 2,500 to 3,500 euro. Wowee. My goodness. Isn't that gorgeous though? Let's have a look. Can we get to the next one? The pictures are not very good resolution or high resolution. You can hardly see, but that's a really nice piece, isn't it? Was anybody else wondering who the mysterious Elder Liechtenstein was? At first I thought it might have something to do with the country, which is located on the borders of Switzerland and Austria. I've been to it before in my travels, which I put onto YouTube. But no, it's spelt slightly differently. Maybe he did have something to do with that country originally, but apparently it was a department store in Texas. You see, if anybody out there in Patreon land on Oddity is located in Texas, you might be able to find out some more. Interior view of Liechtenstein & Sons department store located at 501 to 504 North Chaparral Street in Corpus Christi, Texas. There you go. So he was the mysterious Elder Liechtenstein. We can have a look at some of the photos. There you can see all the men smartly dressed in the men's department waiting customers. And the next one, we have to go up, this is obviously the ladies department selling cookery, utensils and all the other needs for the kitchen. Westinghouse. And there we have the shoe department. So it must have been a rather large department store. Isn't that great? I love the lamp. They're waiting to fit shoes on people's feet. I don't know why it keeps jumping up like that, but there you go. And this is, what is that? Ladies, what is that? I'm not really sure. Are they selling materials? Are they selling materials back there? No, I think there's one more to go. And this seems to be men's shirts, suits, etc. So it must have been a rather large store. I wonder if there is anything left of that building. So if anybody is living in that town or city, whatever it is, Corpus Christi, can you tell me whether the building still exists? Obviously the department store would not be there anymore, but maybe the building still exists, or has it been demolished? Let me know if you can. And finally, I wanted to show you this perfume cabinet, which is styled on a cocktail cabinet. That was the big rage back then. Cocktail parties, cocktail cabinets. Isn't that fabulous? Isn't that gorgeous? God knows how much that is worth. I do remember my sister in the mid-80s had a beautiful Art Deco cocktail cabinet, a real cocktail cabinet, which opened up. The doors were rounded and they opened up. It was all chrome inside. It was fabulous. She eventually ran out of money and she sold it, which she always regretted afterwards. It was such a fabulous piece. There you go. Sometimes I have lost things over the years and I regret, lost them. I sold them because I needed money, but that is really special. Again, I advise you to go and check out 1920s perfume bottles, the expensive ones. Wow, even the lesser expensive ones are so creative. Absolutely amazing, amazing stuff you'll find. Well, my dear friends, I'm going to head off now. I'm going to head off and get my thinking cap on for the next presentation. Look forward to hearing your comments and your feedback as always. Take care, God bless, and bye-bye.